The flashing red and blue lights painted the front of our cabin like a crime scene. Gravel crunched under heavy boots as two uniformed officers stepped out of their cruiser, hands resting just a little too close to their weapons. Karen stood, in the middle of our driveway, arms folded, lips curled into a triumphant smirk like she had just delivered the final blow in some neighborhood war only she understood. Her voice carried through the cool evening air, sharp and shrill, accusing us of trespassing, of illegally occupying HOA property, of breaking rules we had never even heard of. I could see the officers glancing between us and her, weighing her words, their eyes narrowing with suspicion. My heart was pounding, but before I could speak, my wife took a slow, deliberate step forward. She didn't raise her voice, didn't rush. She just reached into her bag. Karen's smirk deepened, almost daring her to try something. The officers shifted their stance, ready for something. For a second, I wondered if this was the moment everything spiraled out of control. My wife's fingers closed around a small, worn leather case, and she pulled it free, holding it up between her and the officers. The air changed instantly. The taller officer's eyes widened. The other straightened, removing his hand from his holster. Karen's expression froze mid-smirk, the color draining from her face as if she'd just realized she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. No one said a word. The only sound was the faint hum of the cruiser's engine and the distant chirp of crickets, like even nature was holding its breath. You're probably wondering how we ended up with police lights flashing outside our cabin, an HOA president screaming at the top of her lungs, and my wife standing there like she had just checkmated the entire board. It didn't happen overnight. It started weeks earlier, on the day we decided to leave the noise of the city behind and settle into what we thought was our dream cabin by the lake. No HOA fees, no endless rules, just peace, quiet, and the sound of the water. We imagined coffee on the porch, evenings by the fireplace, and a fresh start. But we didn't know that a self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, Karen, had her own version of the law, and she was more than ready to enforce it, whether it was real or not. What began as a simple move-in quickly turned into the most bizarre standoff of our lives. When we first saw the cabin, it felt like we'd stepped into a postcard. Nestled among tall pines with a wide wraparound porch and a view of the lake that shimmered like glass in the morning sun, it was everything we'd been dreaming of. After years of city living, traffic jams, noisy neighbors, and a schedule that never seemed to let up, this place felt like freedom. My wife, ever the practical one, had done her research. She found the listing, negotiated the price, and even handled most of the paperwork while I wrapped up work commitments. She had a quiet confidence about her, the kind that comes from facing things most people can't imagine, but at the time I didn't think much about it. We talked about the little things, where the coffee maker would go, how we'd hang string, lights over the porch, and maybe even build a small dock. The nearest town was a 20-minute drive, and the lack of traffic or constant background noise felt like a luxury. There was no HOA mentioned in any of the paperwork, no signs posted, anywhere, just a small, tight-knit community of lakefront homes. We figured we'd introduce ourselves gradually, wave to neighbors, maybe bring over a pie or two once we'd settled in. Life, for the first time in years, felt simple. But simple, as we'd soon learn, doesn't last long when there's someone, like Karen, around, a woman who believed every inch of this neighborhood was hers to control. At first, we didn't even know her name. She was just the sharp-eyed woman we saw across the street the day we moved in, standing with her hands on her hips, watching our every box and piece of furniture like she was inspecting contraband. It was the third morning after we moved in when Karen finally crossed the property line. I was unloading a few tools from the back of my truck when I heard the sharp click of heels on gravel. Turning around, I saw her marching toward me with a clipboard, clutched under one arm like she was on official business. She didn't bother with introductions. just launched straight into questions. Who gave you approval to move in? Did you even submit the occupancy form? I blinked, caught off guard, and told her we'd purchased the cabin outright and didn't need anyone's approval. Her eyes narrowed as if I'd just confessed to a crime. She rattled off a list of mandatory HOA requirements about landscaping, parking, even the color of our mailbox, none of which were mentioned in any legal documents. I tried to explain that there was no HOA governing our property, but she cut me off, her voice rising like a schoolteacher scolding a child. She claimed she was the head of the neighborhood association and that everyone was expected to follow her rules. I could feel my patience thinning, but I kept my tone polite, telling her we weren't interested in joining. That's when she stepped closer, invading my space, and jabbed her finger toward the porch. "You will comply," she said, her smile tight and joyless, "or there will be consequences." She didn't say what those consequences were, but the way she turned on her heel and strode away left me with the uneasy feeling that this was only the opening shot in a much bigger battle. I didn't know it yet, but Karen was already planning her next move, and it would be louder, pettier, and far more personal. Over the next week, Karen's presence became a constant shadow over our new life. It started with neatly folded flyers, left on our porch, printed in bold red letters. Neighborhood standards, immediate compliance required. Each one listed bizarre, hyper-specific rules. No outdoor furniture other than white wicker, lawn mowed exactly every 7 days. No vehicles older than 5 years in the driveway. None of it was legal, of course, but she acted as if these rules were handed down from Congress itself. When we ignored them, she escalated to gossip. Neighbors we'd briefly waved to started giving us tight, uneasy smiles, clearly having heard some wild version of who we were. One evening, I caught her standing at the edge of our property with another neighbor, pointing toward our porch and whispering like they were planning a military operation. Then came the phone calls, always after 9 p.m., always from an unknown number. If I picked up, she would disguise her voice just enough to deny it was her, reading violation notices in a mock official tone before hanging up abruptly. My wife, still unpacking and trying to make the cabin feel like home, told me not to let it get under my skin, but even she started double-checking the locks at night. We'd come here for peace, yet every day felt more like we were under siege. The tipping point came one Friday morning when I stepped outside to find a large yellow sign staked into our front yard. In blocky black letters, it read, "Unauthorized occupants, subject to removal." My blood boiled, but before I could pull it out of the ground, I spotted Karen across the street, leaning against her mailbox, sipping coffee with the slow satisfaction of someone who believed she was winning. My wife didn't flinch under the officer's questioning. While Karen continued her rapid-fire accusations, trespassing, illegal occupancy, refusing to join the association, my wife calmly opened the side pocket of her bag. The taller officer's hand hovered near his belt, but she moved slowly, deliberately pulling out a small leather case. She flipped it open with a quiet snap, revealing her active-duty military ID, the gold seal gleaming under the porch light. For a second, no one spoke. The officer's eyes scanned it, and in an instant, his entire posture shifted. His shoulders straightened, his voice softened, and a flicker of respect passed across his face. "Ma'am," he said, handing it back, carefully, "thank you for your service." The other officer removed his hand from his holster and cleared his throat. Karen's smirk faltered, her face draining of color as if someone had just pulled the ground out from under her. "She's military," she stammered, her voice suddenly small. The officer turned to her, his tone now edged with irritation. "Unless you have legitimate proof of a crime, this is a civil matter. And I suggest you stop wasting police resources." Karen stood frozen, her clipboard hanging loosely at her side. My wife simply tucked her ID away, meeting Karen's gaze, with the calm confidence of someone who had faced far worse than an HOA queen with a clipboard. In that moment, the balance of power shifted, and Karen knew it. The officers didn't linger. After a firm warning about harassment laws and the misuse of emergency services, they left Karen standing in the driveway, red-faced and speechless. She muttered something under her breath before retreating to her house, the slam of her front door echoing across the quiet street. I let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My wife stepped up beside me, her hand finding mine, warm and steady. "Well," she said with a small smile, "I think that's the last time she'll try that." We stood there. For a moment, the night air cool on our skin, watching the cruiser's taillights disappear down the road. For the first time since we moved in, I felt the tension ease from my shoulders. The cabin was ours. The peace we'd come here for finally within reach, and Karen had just learned she couldn't take it from us. Karen thought she could bully us out of our own home with fake rules and empty threats, but she underestimated the kind of people she was dealing with. We didn't come here to start a fight, but we weren't about to back down from one either. My wife's military ID wasn't just a card. It was a reminder that some battles are won not with shouting, but with quiet strength and unshakable resolve. In the end, Karen didn't just lose her fight. She lost the illusion of control. And sometimes, the greatest freedom is simply knowing you can't be moved. If you enjoyed watching Karen's little power trip crumble, make sure to hit that like button so more people can see it. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to. Deal with an HOA nightmare. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your story. And if you want more HOA Karen drama just like this, subscribe and turn on notifications because trust me, the next one will make this look like a friendly tea party.